everybody, and welcome back to Season 3 of Books and Booze, the series where the Lushes get together with some indie authors and talk about the books they wrote and let them read a little bit and get a little drunk on the side. So I'm going to pass it to Dawn to introduce this week's author.
Hey guys, we have a special guest today. A fellow podcaster decided to write a book, and they follow us, we follow them. I want to introduce Niall from Fuck Buddies podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
You
Thanks
forgot
for
to
having me
mention
on.
he's Canadian. I just want to point
And
that
he's
out.
a Canadian author.
I'm only half Canadian though, really. I'm actually from Ireland. I don't know if you guys know.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I was like, wait a minute.
Nowhere
Okay,
bad.
I didn't know that actually. I
Yeah,
thought
I moved-
like a pair.
I moved over when I was 21, so
Wow.
yeah.
You can't even tell. Like no accent, none.
It's really bad. Every time I call my family back home, I just get mocked mercilessly.
For your Canadian accent now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's really bad. But when I'm home, like after like a day and a half, I sound like I've never left. And then when I get back, I have about a day and a half where nobody understands me. And then they're like, wait, did you even go home?
That's crazy. I need to see like Irish Niall one day.
Well, you know what? If I have enough of these, maybe he'll come out. We'll see. Cheers, by the way.
Cheers. Cheers.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're drinking?
Sure. So this is a beer from Slake, the brewery out in like Prince Edward County. They're really good. It was just in the LCBO, but I'm big into like IPAs, so I got a bunch of IPAs in a bag right beside my desk right now. We'll see how many I get through.
Double fisting.
Hell yeah. I guess I skipped the part about me. My name is Niall.
You're like, I'm a drunk. Here's
yeah,
my beer.
I went straight to being like, let me introduce my beers, not me.
Yeah, forget me. I want my alcohol being presented.
Exactly. So I'm from Ireland. I moved over when I was 21. I have two podcasts. You mentioned Fuck Buddies earlier. We also have No Quest for the Wicked. One is a sex and dating advice podcast. One is like a sci-fi D&D podcast, effectively.
Fuck Buddies is the D&D podcast.
Yeah, weirdly, No Quest for the Wicked is the dating one. It's actually really funny because you know the way you get like tailored ads on like Facebook or whatever?
Yeah.
My tailored ads today have been for like a sex D&D game, and it's just like it's called Lewd Dungeons. I shouldn't maybe be promoting them. I know nothing about them.
I think I've seen something like that actually. I mean, of course I would, but yeah.
Yeah. That's my intersection. That's where I live.
Nice. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so I have written a few short stories that are published. I've written a few novels and screenplays and graphic novels that have not been published, hopefully yet. But I'm going to be reading from this today, which is it's an anthology of short stories from a publisher called Zombies Need Brains, they're an American-based like indie press, but they're really good. They are a pleasure to work with, and they work with a lot of really cool writers and stuff, a lot of awards going to a few of them. So I got published in there halfway through last year. It's a story called Scaling Up Business. And it's like an urban fantasy like thriller. So I'll be reading from that today.
Nice.
Cool.
All right, Jessica, you want to tell us the drink words?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just because of what Dawn does, 99% of the people on this podcast are just reading smut, so it's nice to get like a change once in a while.
I don't always just bring smut authors, okay?
99%.
No, not even 99.
Stats.
Like, it's like 70%, okay? Like we had a poet come on that I found.
Legitimized us.
Was it smut poetry?
No.
Actually.
We had a fantasy author. We had a couple actually.
We had a sci-fi. We're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Anyway, on to the drink words. So the drink words for tonight are glass, wine, whiskey, my favorite, money, my second favorite, and ferocious.
Nice.
Yeah,
I figured I would keep them thematic. So
yeah,
3 of them
good.
are pretty drink oriented.
Well, I'm going to mute myself because I'm going to be slurping away. And you start reading whenever you want. You just let us know when you're finished.
Sure. I'm gonna have a document up so I won't see you. So if you do anything very funny while muted, I'm not gonna be aware of it. But
You'll just
You'll have
hear
to
us.
watch the YouTube video.
I will. And that's the upsell right there. All right. Scaling up business. It was the first time Tessa had been sober in days, but it didn't feel like it. Whisked from a holding cell to the courtroom to this sleek, dark car. Not where she expected to end up. Not where she deserved to. You've got some spine, the man said. He sat across from her, short and slim, but something about him made her feel like he was bigger, pressed right up into her face. She'd have leaned back if the seats reclined. Not many people would try something like that. Probably because it was stupid. She should be in jail or dead, and the man knew he was the only reason she wasn't. He deserved it. Don't we all? Not too long ago, Tessa wouldn't have agreed with him. Care for a drink? More than anything. He produced a bottle from some hidden compartment and poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler. It was sipping whiskey, but she'd been dry for a day of shaking, vomiting, and nausea, and it was the only thing that could fight the ache in her head and maybe win. She knocked it back, closed her eyes, and felt the warmth course through her like electricity. When she opened them, the man was filling her glass again. He didn't seem to mind her wasting it. Probably didn't mean much to someone who had their own driver and hidden drink compartments. Do you know who I am? He fixed her with sharp, gray eyes. Tessa hesitated. My brother worked for you. He nodded. Terrible thing that happened to him. That hit her like a slap. She downed her second glass. Will you deal with him? The man that you almost dealt with yourself? He smiled. She couldn't do the same. Not now, I'm afraid. Why? She pressed, heedless of how dangerous this man was. Her ears still rang from the day before. He'll be at some underground hospital by now, having your bullet removed. Besides, he finished the last of his whiskey. Politics. Why did you get me out? Tessa's lawyer had never shown up. A fleet of well-dressed sharks had arrived in his stead and crushed the case against her in a day. She wasn't sure how. She'd been in a daze. But considering who'd picked her up outside the courtroom, she was certain lawyers weren't the extent of it. Bribes at minimum, or threats. You're an accountant, he said. I was. After her brother's death, her job had been the next thing to go following her sobriety. Well, I'm offering you a job. Seriously? His smile died. I need someone new. You've got spine, and your brother was a good soldier. Besides, he filled her glass again. Without me, you might well have gone away for the rest of your life. So it's not exactly an offer, is it? Compared to jail, I guess not. You're welcome. Another glass down. What do I call you? You don't. The car stopped. Through tinted windows, she saw large warehouses looming around them, circled by flocks of gulls. They didn't make a sound. Nothing outside did. She wondered if that was another rich person thing, or maybe the car was bulletproof. So some money's gone missing? Not exactly. And then there's like a page break. They wouldn't give Tessa spirits. Nothing highly flammable was allowed in the warehouse. They had a fire suppression system that would lock the place down and pump it with CO2, so they weren't taking any chances. When she'd asked what would happen to her if the alarm got triggered, all she'd gotten was a grim laugh. If that happens, no one inside is making it out, nor should they. The most she could get was wine then, which wasn't ideal, but she'd make do. At least they brought her a vineyard's worth. They didn't seem to care how slosh she got, unlike her previous job. If she failed, though, she knew she'd be far worse than fired. She added half a bottle of red to the whiskey in her system, doing a decent job of numbing the general pain of what was left of her life, but even so, the figure she was staring at cut through the haze. People with money like this existed, of course. Everyone knew it, but actually seeing it tallied up looked like a bad joke. Her office was a small room overlooking the warehouse floor, nothing but rows of 2-story shelves stacked with wooden crates. Had a desk, a grimy coffee machine, a shitty laptop with no internet. Her phone had no signal either. They'd given her an actual pager instead, and a green stained couch. Along with an ill-lit bathroom, it was her home for the foreseeable future. She didn't mind. She planned to be drunk enough to sleep anywhere. Besides, Rourke had survived. He was no less dangerous than the people she was mixed up with now, and his crew would be able to find her home easily. She knew what they'd do if they caught her. When she pulled that gun on him, she figured she'd kill him or die. She hadn't counted on this third option, and she had no idea what to do with it. As much as she didn't want to live, she couldn't quite face the idea of dying, especially painfully. For now, she'd stick with what she did best, alcohol and work. She delved as far back as she could before the wine and darkness pulled her under. And then there's another page break. The morning had brought headaches and confusion, but once Tessa managed to remember where she was and downed a glass to take the edge off, she discovered the boss hadn't been wrong. Problem wasn't missing money. There was extra. Without the luxury of a bank to keep their cash, the company averaged a 10% monthly loss for spoilage, money lost to rats, damp, or insects. It was more than most people saw in a year. There was an entire section dedicated to the funds spent combating this wastage, shoring up the foundations, buying a small fortune in traps and plastic wrap, but apparently her predecessor could only do so much. Until recently, that is. 2 months ago, that number had started to plummet. The last spoilage count, a week previous, had dropped to only 3%. The difference was staggering. Tessa could buy a small home in the countryside outright. Her pager buzzed, showing just one word: door. The boss was waiting for her with a grease-stained brown paper bag. You're still kicking, he said. Glad we were right to leave you with your shoelaces. What's this? Breakfast sandwiches. There's a selection. I'm sure something will suit you. Her stomach was sour. The thought of food made her feel ill. She'd have to eat at some point, though. The accountant who did these, can I talk to him? He shook his head. Dead as disco, I'm afraid. Did you? He laughed. We thought about it, but we needed to prove his guilt first. Then he was involved in the hit. It took her a second. He was with Peter? Your brother was guarding him. That sobered her right up. Was this job related to Peter's death? There's no money missing, though. Why consider killing him? If there's more money now, there's a reason there wasn't before. It always lined up with our expected wastage, so we didn't care. But if our losses lessened at some point and the number didn't, why would he start reporting it then? Why indeed? We should hire our very own accountant to figure it out, shouldn't we? He slammed the door in her face. The heavy locks shut into place like she'd gone to jail after all. The unmistakable waft of bacon was too much, too soon, so she set the food down on a nearby shelf. Numbers were one thing. Either they were being misreported or the preventative measures had somehow, drastically, kicked in. Regardless, the only way to verify the reports was to actually see the money, make sure the protection was working, and get her own count. If her brother's killer was involved. Patrick Rourke. He'd managed to get an innocent verdict despite multiple witnesses to his triple homicide, and the news had broken her. She could still see his face when they'd met, wide-eyed and grinning even though he'd just been shot. She'd been tackled a moment later by a bystander, hauled to prison in a blur of questions and fingerprints. She shouldn't have gone free either. Apparently money talks louder than guilt. She couldn't dwell on it. She found a crowbar propped against the wall and managed to pop the top off one of the crates stacked on the shelves. She'd expected money, vacuum sealed and coated in rat poison, but instead she was greeted by stacks of cherry red toasters. Tessa assumed the gang had bribed enough people to keep the warehouse safe, but it made sense they wouldn't just have the cash lying around. Where the hell were they keeping it then? None of the crates stood out. They were just the same uniform pale wood, this way up, printed on the side in black. The money couldn't have been hidden within the frame of the shelves either, or else the damp and the rats wouldn't have been a problem. The damp and the rats. Her eyes were drawn to the walls, green and corrugated. It was that or under the floor. It didn't take long when she knew where to look. There were low rectangular grates on the walls, gleaming like someone had taken care of them. She knew by the chill in the air that they weren't used for heating. It was only when she'd found a hidden latch in the corner that she realized there was a chance they were part of the fire suppression system. No alarm sounded when she lifted it open, though, and she didn't fall to the ground choking. Besides, there was nothing behind the grates but dark, empty space. It was funny. 2 weeks ago, you couldn't have paid her to climb into the walls after reading reports about a rat problem so bad the gang was losing thousands a week. Now, though, she just finished her wine and crawled in. Either the money was misreported or the measures had finally worked, and she needed the proof for herself. That was it. She could stand inside, the hidden space going up to the roof, wide enough for her to spread her arms almost fully. The flashlight on her phone didn't reveal any dark shapes scurrying towards her, but it did show her something more interesting: the money. It was stacked in huge plastic blocks that reflected the light strangely, although she could see thousands upon thousands of bills. It was bad enough. Already, I'll give you a pause. Already she could see hundreds upon thousands of bills. It was bad enough seeing the figures written down, quite another to be staring at more money than she'd ever made. Nothing seemed damaged. She edged around the stack and found more, countless blocks of notes, all wrapped in plastic, seemingly untouched. Maybe it was a simple solution after all, measures perfected after weeks of trial and error, and she could wash her hands of this job by dinner. She wasn't sure what would happen to her then, but she didn't care. Then she saw her first rat. She thought it was two of them before she realized it was just gigantic and ripped in half. The blood leaking from it had long since dried. Clearly it hadn't been poisoned, but there were no visible traps. It wasn't the only casualty either. Slightly further on, she found a little rat massacre. A dozen bodies lay on the floor, all torn apart. Beyond them were more dark shapes, but these were different. She stepped carefully between the corpses until she could make them out. It was cash, a trail of bills that led away into the darkness. The nearest block was half empty. She crouched down and fingered the plastic at the corner. It hadn't been chewed through. The slit was clean, like someone had taken a scalpel to it. Was someone stealing? If so, why stop? How'd they gotten away with it? The half-empty brick was obvious, and the trail of bills leading away was cartoonish. After the danger of getting into the warehouse and making away with a small fortune, who would leave that in their wake? No one in their right mind. Nonetheless, it was a trail they wanted you to follow. There was no way she couldn't. Note after note, corpse after corpse, until she turned the corner and finally saw something move. Just a glimpse of something long and sinuous, like a snake with legs, before it disappeared into the shadows. What the fuck? She'd found what she was looking for, though. The trail ended in a circular mound of cash, easily thousands of dollars. She reached out to check the notes, and something hissed at her. She shone her light and saw the creature hiding behind a nearby pipe. It was scaled, its mouth open to reveal rows of needle-like teeth like a puppy's. Two large amber eyes reflected the light. It was about the length of her leg. On its back, barely visible in the shadows, she could see two tiny wings. She didn't know much about animals, but she had a fair idea this thing shouldn't exist. Unsteadily, she turned around and left. It's another page break. Tessa had read about alcohol-induced hallucinations, pink elephants or snakes, but she was fairly sure that only happened when you stopped drinking, which she hadn't. Besides, nowhere had anyone mentioned imagining a goddamn tiny dragon. Her buzzer vibrated. Door. Boss handed her another bag as some goons slid a crate of water bottles across the threshold. He studied her face. God knows how she looked. Sleep hadn't exactly come easy. Please tell me there's still some wine left. She snorted. He paused before leaving. Peter was a good man. He wouldn't want you joining him so soon. He was gone before she figured out whether that was a threat or actual concern. At least he hadn't asked about her investigation. What would she say? The rats aren't a problem anymore because a dragon's eating them? A dragon? She was insane. The smell of breakfast had the opposite effect today, though, and she was through a bottle of water and 2 sandwiches in a matter of minutes. Once she was full, she knew she couldn't put it off any longer. She needed to be sure. Tess was back in the walls a minute later. This time she brought the crowbar. For a second, she thought she imagined it all. The first rat was gone, but there was still a stain on the ground where it had been. The plastic further on was still sliced open, too. If anything, it was missing even more money than before. She paused at the corner to take a breath. Her head ached, but she was as sure she could be that she was lucid. When she stepped around the corner, though, the impossible thing was still there. It didn't run this time. It turned sideways and arched its back, tiny wings spread wide, like a cat trying to make itself look bigger. It hissed, at least. Tessa thought that was what it was trying to do. It sounded more like a rusty hinge. It was real. Tessa wasn't sure how long she stood there staring, but eventually the creature curled up on what was clearly its nest. Its scaled lids didn't fully close, though, the lizard feigning being relaxed. It was watching her. The money beneath it, even though it must have gathered it with its mouth or talons, seemed unharmed. The trail of bills from the day before was gone, too, presumably added to the pile. She'd been tasked with figuring out why the money seemed to be spoiling less. This little guy, or gal, had to be it, which was an issue. Because what the hell was she supposed to tell the boss? He wouldn't believe her. If he did, she didn't want to find out what would happen to the thing. She shifted, and its eyes snapped open. It gave that squeak again, fearsome as a stuffed toy. A month ago, she'd been worried about how she'd find time for the gym during the tax season rush. Now here she was, a shell of a person. Her brother was gone, her job, her life, and she was staring at a dragon, trying its best to be ferocious. And I'll stop it there.
Okay, I just want to say I talked about it being as our podcast being like 99% smut, and then it started so sexy. I was like, oops. No, but I was not expecting a dragon. Awesome.
Well, hopefully a good surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pro dragon for sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So what has been published? Like, what have you gotten published?
So at the moment, I have 2 short stories that are out. Weirdly, both about dragons, which is really like, it's such a stereotypical fantasy thing to be like, I'm writing about dragons, but like I usually don't. And yet the only 2 things I wrote about dragons got published. Who knew?
That's your strength. Like, play to your strengths. It's dragons.
Yeah. So hold on. Didn't knock anything over. Success. So this is the first like anthology that I was published in. It's also by Zombies Need Brains. But it was a fun thing where basically the prompt or like the theme of the anthology was that it had to be about dragons and a dragon had to be one of the point of view characters in it. So I have a story called The Princess Network in that. Then Scaling Up Business got into the ZMB Presents Year 2, which is kind of like a best of last year thing that they did. And I have a forthcoming story, probably will be out by the time this comes out. It's coming out sometime in February.
Cool.
But it's with a Toronto magazine called Tales and Feathers, which do cozy fantasy.
Okay.
Which I'm pretty excited about. It's a very weird story. It's the kind of like when you write a story so weird that you know if it doesn't get into the intended place, it's not going to get in anywhere.
Fair. Yep.
But it did, so I don't need to worry, which is cool. So I'm excited for that to come out, and then I have another one that I've sold, but it's coming out, I think, at the end of 2025. I don't know how much I can say about it, but it's a different company again, and it's basically like superheroes in small town Canada was the theme of the anthology. Yeah,
That's awesome.
so
That's
it's
amazing.
yeah, it's really cool. I'm excited for that. Yeah, again, I wish I could tell you more about that one. I just don't know what I'm allowed to
You
say.
know what? It just means you'll have to be back on at the next season for
Hell
like
yeah,
that
let's
book.
do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want to ask one more because like just how you were telling your stories and just where your stories go. Are like do you plot out what you're gonna write or do you just wing it and then
I'm
edit?
definitely more of like a pantser. Like if you in writing circles, always like plotter, pantser. I like generally have an idea, but that idea is like a sentence or two, not like, a couple of pages. I'm very, just kind of like seat of my pants on the whole thing.
Nice. What got you into writing?
I always like when I was a kid, I was like a huge reader. Like I read an insane amount. Like I would read all the time and I would read stuff like when I was like 10, I was reading like The Lord of the Rings and I also read really quickly. So like it used to be a joke in my family where like we'd go on holidays and like I would have like 8 fucking like hardcover books in my suitcase and no room for anything else. And then I'd finish them all in like a week and they'd be like, okay, what are we doing here? So when Kindles came out, they were like, thank God.
Yeah, my husband says the same thing. He's like,
yeah. So I always liked it. And when I was like a kid in school, I liked, like creative writing and doing stuff like that. I don't know whether like what the like turning point was that like made me be like, yeah, this is the thing I want to work for years at and not get paid. But
yeah.
it, like podcasting, I have a
I was
really
gonna
bad
say,
habit.
we're podcasters. We get it. We understand the struggle.
Of all the things I chose to be super into, it's the like 2 of the worst things where you work so hard and get no money. But then sometimes you do. So
we're like,
It is true.
yay!
yeah, and when you do, it's
$100.
great. I got paid for those stories and they pay well. So no, this is not me casting shade on them. This is just me complaining about industries in general. No, so I remember when I was a kid, like the like Redwall books
I believe so.
where like it's like fantasy with like squirrels and swords and shit.
Yeah.
So my first thing I ever wrote was like I got a little like copybook that I was meant to bring to school and use for math, and I just started plagiarizing the shit out of Redwall, and that was it. That was the first thing, and then I've been hooked ever since.
Nice. You just talked about, like the struggle of not getting paid, right away. But like what else was like a couple of struggles that you went through being like self-published indie author starting out, especially in Canada?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've never actually self-published anything.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always been like a consideration, but I definitely kind of want to try go the traditional publishing route. I think like one of the struggles, and I realize it is also kind of a blessing, is like it's just you. You know what I mean? It's not like a collaborative effort. It's not like a team, which can be good because, if you're waiting on something or if you need something done, you just got to yell at yourself. And that's easy to do. It's hard to yell at other people. But it is kind of like isolating in a way. I will also say just like the feedback element is really difficult because no one's really going to read like a 140,000 word novel that you've written unless they really love you. And if they really love you, they're not going to give you proper feedback. You know what I mean? And the way the publishing industry goes, it's like if you send out stuff, you never really hear back. Like even like when you send out like query letters for a novel, if you get a rejection, that's a good sign. Then there's like a personalized rejection, which is like the next better sign. So it's like you very rarely hear any kind of like feedback. So I found like, and I think like as creative people, sometimes it's very easy to be negative about yourself and how good you are. So sometimes you're in that void of just like you don't know where you're at. You kind of just think you're shit. So I think it is just hard to get like proper feedback. And like I've been in writing groups and stuff, and there's a lot of people who go into writing groups and then don't like contribute as equally, you know what I mean? Like you'll do someone's full novel and then they'll be like, yeah, I didn't get to yours, bye. And you're like, okay.
I'll just go fuck myself now. All right.
Yeah, for real. It's gotten to the point that happened to me like 3 different times, to the point where I was like, the next writing group I joined, I finished someone's book. I had all these notes and I was like, I'm done. They're like, send them over. And I was like, yeah, when you have yours. And then they got like annoyed about it. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I've been hurt too many times before. And then they never sent me any. So I was like, what the fuck?
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah.
So I think,
annoying.
yeah, just like feeling like you're in a vacuum sometimes, or like this void where like you don't know if you're getting better, if you're getting worse or anything, you know, and you could send a book and be like in the top 2%, but they only even reply to the top 1%. So for all you know, you're down in the 70s or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you like, since you're trying to go like trad publishing, do you have like people edit for you, or like
No. I just edit them
you're just
myself.
by
yeah.
yourself? You're just doing it all.
Yeah. I've seen like a lot of like, you always read the like what to do and like advice and blah, blah, blah. And I know a lot of people caution against getting someone to edit your stuff before you send it to a publisher, because like, unless you're willing to hire an editor every time you're trying to get something out, which, you know, you might go through rounds and rounds of edits and it's not cheap. It's not going to be indicative of like your voice or how you edit. So it can actually kind of like work against you.
Fair.
True. Yeah.
Also, I'm poor, so
Yeah. Broke. Just.
yeah.
There's a reason I edit this podcast.
It's true. It's true. Okay, I'll go. Who is one of your favorite authors?
Have you ever heard of China Miéville?
No, I have not.
He's great. He would be, I would say he definitely became my favorite like later on. Like if we want, I can go through the entire, like, you know, when I was a kid, it was definitely different to when I was a teenager to then, like, you know, but I think like Terry Pratchett is one of the biggest ones like over the course of my life. And I actually had the joy of seeing him talk in the university in Dublin before he passed. But China Miéville, I think, is one of the, like, there's just something about the way he writes. He'll like make up words and like it works. Like it sounds fucking insane, but like he will just do a word and you'll like, I know it's not real, but it feels like it should be.
I do that
And
in
it just
real life,
fits.
like
Yeah.
in real time.
Yeah, and it works so well. He's also just like just crazy. I don't know. Like his stuff is so fucking weird. Like he did a retelling of Moby Dick, but like the sea is just railway tracks and all the boats are trains. And you're just like, it's just a jumble of fucking railway tracks and they're just riding these, like it's crazy. And you're like, that wouldn't work. But then you read it and you're like, yeah, that works.
That sounds awesome, actually. I feel like working in any sort of creative field, you have to have like some level of like delulu.
Oh, for sure.
Like you're like, I'm shit, but I'm sure someone wants to like see my art.
Yeah, you'd be like, I'm shit, but like, fuck it. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna
just
pretend
do
I'm
it.
not, or we're just gonna not think about that.
Exactly.
Do you have like imposter syndrome at all, or do you like you?
Oh,
like,
I had imposter
feel that?
syndrome coming on here today. Like, literally, I was just telling my partner, I'm like, they're gonna ask me questions. I'm gonna seem like a fucking idiot, and then it's just gonna be like, they're gonna be like, actually, get off. We'll get like a real writer on.
Next to us, no one can look like a fucking idiot, so you're
No.
fine.
No.
Before you got on, I was like, I don't even know like what I'm gonna say. Like I lost my book and everything. I was like, fuck it. I'm just winging it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
We're
Well, no,
professionals.
hey, you guys don't seem like you're winging it. You seem like you're dialed in. So there we go. But
We've
yeah, I
done
get
this
it.
once or twice, but like,
Yeah, I get it all the time.
Yeah.
nice. I'm trying to think of other questions.
Because you lost your book of questions.
I know, like,
What's the book? Is a book where like do you pre-write questions or?
yeah, so I don't
yeah.
have to remember anymore.
We're
That's fair.
drinking.
I'm drinking water. I
Oh
can't
yeah,
really
you're
do
not
that.
drinking. I'm drinking.
That's what's missing.
I know, like,
One time, Niall, I will tell you, you're a fellow podcaster, so we can talk podcasting stuff
Mhm,
too.
yeah.
Canadian podcaster, award-winning Canadian podcaster. Once we had an author on, sci-fi author, and I happened to have been coming back from my in-laws, so I was a little tipsy, a little bit drunk at the start of the episode.
Mhm.
By the time we got to question period after the reading, I was done. So I asked the same question, reworded 3 different times.
it was
Did you
4
get-
or 5 times actually.
Did you get
well-
different answers?
Yeah,
Like,
he
every
kept going.
question.
I was so proud of him. I was like, good job. Like,
Nice.
I wouldn't have been able to do that. I was surprised I could say it 5 different ways.
That is
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
She just switched the
But-
words a little bit, but it was the same freaking question. And I'm like listening to her, I'm like, that was the same thing. And then she did like the 4th time, and I'm
No
like,
one stopped me. So I don't even blame myself, actually.
Was
You
it
know
an
what?
interesting question?
I don't even remember.
I was
That's-
impressed too. So I was like, let her go.
You're just
like,
watching
whatever.
me go. Like,
And like the answer was different, but like at this, like he just reworded the answer. It was the same answer. He just reworded. He was playing the same game. I was like,
Hey, that's some pro moves right there.
exactly. It was
have
a
you
good
ever
episode.
had like a big flub on your podcast, on either podcast before, like my flubs?
So I once showed up. I got off work and I worked in a bar that had the most beer on tap of like anywhere in Canada. And every now and then they would have like beer fests in the backyard. And a friend of mine had like rented out space at a brewery and like brewed his own cask to bring to that thing. And like when he got off work, he was like, "Oh, you got to come try it." And of course I was going to try it, but we had to record because we've done like for Fuck Buddies, we've done like 320 episodes released weekly for like 7.5 years or 7 years, but we've never missed one. So we're very serious. So it's like, no matter what happens, I'll be there and we'll record. But what happened was I went and I was like, I could have a couple beers. And then I had like 20. So I fully do not remember recording that episode in any way, shape, or form.
Birds of a feather.
Yeah, it worked. It was fine. No one complained or stopped listening. But other than that, I think we've done like 2 pretty big flubs. And one was we had the wrong mic, like what almost happened today. But it was me and Dane used to record in a small closet and his laptop was behind us and everything was connected to it. But it was his laptop mic was the only thing recording for the both of us. And it wasn't even in front of us. So we had this one episode really early on, like definitely on our first 10 or 20 episodes that like you can hear it technically. And then maybe the worst one because it could have gone really well. Do you guys know Therapy Jeff?
Yeah.
So
do.
we had Therapy
Oh, he's
Jeff
on
on the
TikTok.
podcast. Yeah, he's like really big. We got him on just after I think he hit like 3 million on TikTok, 3 million followers. I think he hit 1 million on Instagram. So we were feeling like really good because, you know, it was our biggest like guest. And we just kind of started doing a bunch of like video content. So we were like, perfect time. We've got it all sorted out. We got a great guest on. I'll make a bunch of clips. Hell yeah. And then Dane didn't hit record for the video. So we got the episode, thankfully, but we didn't get any video. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I felt very bad. He was really ill. He'd just come off like what was probably COVID. Like he was fucked. And like the brain fog was real. And I felt bad because he, you know, it wasn't his fault. Whatever, mistakes happen. But it was just a bad time for that mistake to have happened.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
I
So
get
those
sick
are-
all the time. I get it.
Yeah, right.
If you listen to our podcast at least 5 times, you'll hear I've been sick.
Yeah.
I show up
We-
to work though.
We
That's
have
fair,
it
yeah.
if you cough then the listeners have to
drink.
take a drink.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
fine. It's just part of the podcast. We just make it part of the podcast. So
How many
Part of the
people
lore.
listening along drink during the drink words?
a good question. We should ask them. No one's complained. Like, it's been a part of Books and Booze since first episode.
Mhm.
So I hope, because I've been drinking and I finished a whole beer during your reading. So
Well, I
had
was gonna ask, did you find there was enough drink words?
There was, yeah.
There
Okay.
was a good, and like you'd get like in spurts. And then you get
Yeah.
like a little break and you're like, okay. And then it'd come in spurts again. So it was like, it's good.
Yeah,
No,
I
it's
found a
good.
few that I thought would be said a bunch of times, but I really wanted the last word to also be a drink word. So I put one in where I knew it only happened once. So
No,
No,
it was
that
good
was
balance.
smart. We've had a couple authors who are just like giving names, and that name would be repeated
mhm.
in every other sentence, and we're just constantly going. We're like, okay, we can't keep going.
We have
can't.
some authors that watch us.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
And
really
they'll
bummed I
say the
couldn't,
word.
honestly. Like, I have my document up. I should have just fucking memorized the whole thing and dead-eyed you the entire time.
Oh my god! If you memorized it, you should have put a camera behind you, pointed at your screen to prove.
Just to show. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that
that
it's-
never would have happened. I was going to be a dick and make it like and like he and she or something, but
What the? Like,
yeah.
Like I think we had someone do I once, and it like
something like that.
like
yeah.
or like some
Was it first
pronoun.
person?
I think
Yes.
so.
'Cause
Probably if
that's-
they used I.
That's
yeah,
rough.
like
I think that's
most-
attempted murder.
Actually, that's a good question. Why do you write in third person versus first?
So that's actually a really interesting considering today because I'm doing the NYC Midnight thing alongside Jess, and I started writing which is a short story competition for those listening who do not know. But I started writing it and I did about 600-700 words in third person. And then when I started the next, I did a little break and time skipped. And then when I got back in, I was writing in first person and I was like, yeah, this is how I should have started. For me, I think it's a lot is genre and topic, because there's a certain you're so internal when it's first person that you can give away a lot about someone's emotional state without it being really pedantic and you're just they feel this. It's a lot easier to be I feel this, right?
Mhm.
So you can really get inside somebody a lot better with first person, whereas third person, it gives you a little bit more of the external stuff. So for me, I think thrillers and rom-com, those are two that I've written in first person, whereas with fantasy and I kind of just, I don't know. I felt like it worked for this. I generally write in third person, but every now and then I think first person works.
I agree with you. I found that fantasy in third person works really, really well. But
Yeah.
in romance or in thrillers, it has to be first person. I cannot read third person romance. I can't do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, this makes me feel like I'm part of a threesome. Like I'm an outsider and
Yeah,
not
you're
in
a
the book.
voyeur, you're just
Yeah.
peeking through the curtains.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know. I want to be in the story, not
Yeah, Dawn's
side
into
character.
POV stuff. So
Yeah.
her sex video games and her porn all has
Fair.
to be POV.
Yeah.
No voyeur. I get it. All right. Yeah, I know that's totally right though. So I was writing a rom-com for this short story contest, and the third person just felt so impersonal.
Mhm.
So yeah, I had to change it. But then I fucking hate changing from I'd rather write it fresh than change it from third person to first, because I find it just fucks with my brain. So I got to redo that part again tomorrow. if
I
I've done.
handed mine in. I was like,
That's
know what?
impressive.
This is good. And well, okay, for the record, Niall actually tweeted out this competition, anyone doing this? And then I was like, I just signed up. I saw it 10 minutes ago. And
That's
I just,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm impulsive.
But it's funny because, again, speaking of imposter syndrome and shit, it's I've done a bunch of short stories. I've been in short story contests, and I literally have published or sold 4 in the last year and a half. But I've always looked at this contest and been maybe. And, I've never consciously said no, but I've always maybe did until it's too late. So that's basically the same thing. And then this year, like even when I saw it and I was like, oh, I have time, it took me so long to fucking talk myself into it. So I'm impressed.
If you ever need someone to talk you into something, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I'll call you guys up every time I need to make a decision. I'll be like, let's go.
Oh no, Dom will tell you no.
No. I'll still do
Depends,
it.
hey,
I'll just
depends
no,
on the
I'll
decision, I think.
just be like, yeah, go for it. Go. Yeah.
She's like, I don't care.
Yeah. I just like, whatever you want. I'm so chill. I'm like,
Me,
Do
I'm like, nah, just do it.
She's
Like,
a
I don't care what
pusher.
it is.
straight up pusher.
I'm really good at pushing other people, but I'm very like, when it comes to me, I don't know. I'll think about like every single fucking possibility, a lot of which won't even be possible, and I'll just like go through 1,000 of them, and then I'll be like, what was I thinking about again?
Okay, here's the brain trick I do.
Mhm.
Speaking of first and third person, I think of myself as third person.
Okay.
'Cause
So
I'm
you'll be like,
this
she's thinking about doing
is
this.
signing up for a writing competition. Not me. Jessica is.
I can't tell if that's a really healthy or really unhealthy
I did it,
process.
didn't I?
You did do it. You did do it. No, I'm impressed.
Yeah, so it's just like, like I'm not even viewing like my friends, like when we came up with this podcast, I was like, Jessica, Dawn, and Sonia are doing a podcast. And not me, Dawn, and Sonia are doing a podcast. Jessica, Dawn, and Sonia. Yeah, just switch your brain thinking. You can't be
True.
self-conscious of a third person.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, just food for thought. Food for thought. When it comes to writing, do you think you'll ever release a novel, or are you just waiting for a publisher to accept one?
Like as in do self-published?
Well, I'm just like, is there like a point where you might try self-publishing, or are you?
Yeah,
just
yeah. Hypothetically, it's like for me, it's because self-publishing is much like podcasting. You have to do everything. Like you're not just a writer. You're now a writer. You're a graphic designer. You're a layout specialist. You're a fucking lawyer.
Or you have to hire multiple people to do all these.
And again,
little
I'm
steps.
poor.
Yeah.
So
it's not cheap. No.
Yeah, exactly. And like I know a lot of people use AI. Fuck those people and AI. Sorry.
Yeah, we don't do.
I'm not sorry, actually. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So like I'm not ever gonna do that. But to do it right, it takes a lot of time, effort, money. So yeah, I don't know. I was very like I was very good at being on the like novel train a couple of years ago. Because I've written a bunch. That's not the problem. The problem for me is sending them out. And I sent out I'd done like an urban fantasy set in Dublin that I was really happy with, and it had gotten some pretty decent like responses in a bunch of places, and it almost got published. It was like full requested by like this huge agency, but then the guy left publishing because it was COVID, and like everything kind of broke down. So like I never knew whether it was like, because I never heard anything back. It was just like I got ghosted by this man. So like there was some level of success, and I always wonder if I had just been a little better at like keeping on it. But then like podcasting really kind of took a lot of my time and energy, and then I kind of like just taking a breath from novels started writing short stories, and then they started getting published. So a lot of the time was kind of spent doing that stuff. And so it is one of those things I want to get back into and try to like give it like a proper effort, because I feel like I just haven't in a way. But I do find it kind of daunting to like go back after kind of being out of it. So it's like you look at, much like if I gave a friend a 140,000 word novel to read, I look at my own one, I'm like, God, that's a lot of work.
Niall's writing a novel, not
you. Yeah. So it is definitely a thing. My plan for this year is I wrote a script last year that I am pretty happy with. I want to try to do something with that, and I do want to try like work on getting novels out there a little bit more. Yeah, so it's definitely I'm sure it's a possibility. I just don't have like a timeline on it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have another question, so I'm just gonna go.
Go for it.
So is there a genre you haven't written yet that you might try writing or exploring?
I don't think so. I don't think so because I've written like fantasy, horror, sci-fi, comedy,
You've done them
thriller,
all.
rom-com, erotica. Like I've kind of done a
Have you
little
written a
bit.
mystery yet?
Not really. I've written like thrillers with like mystery angles. So like a straight mystery, no. And that's the thing. There's so many like offshoots, right? So it's
Yeah.
like I would almost put like crime, thriller, mysteries in like the same like bucket because there's flavors. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there's a mystery purist out there who's like, this piece of shit.
NYC Midnight had a definition.
True, yeah. And that's the thing. That's why I'm scared is like when you get genres, you need to be so like mystery has its own shit. Where like thriller, I'm hoping I get thriller next one.
I got
That would be fun.
mystery, and that was an adventure. I was like,
Yeah.
I gotta solve this thing. Oh no.
Yeah, I feel like I will be a little like, "Ugh," if I get mystery. You got a tough one to start with.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's definitely ones I want to try more of. I want to write like a Hallmark movie. I have it all plotted out and everything. I just need to like do it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I
So
am
I
a
think
big fan of Hallmark movies.
I love
I've
them. They're
watched
great
so
fun.
many in my life. It's ridiculous.
Every Christmas, she like tells us a new one, and she'll be like, "Hey, so I watched this." I'm like, "Okay, the Christmas Wedding Planner, awesome."
Okay, that's my favorite, and they removed it from Netflix this year, and I got so sad. Joey Fatone is in it, from like NSYNC.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, this year we kind of went off on watching them, like a lot of Merry Gentlemen, a lot of Hot Frosty. Have you guys seen A Royal Corgi Christmas?
No.
It's so fucking good because it's so fucking stupid. It's like this elite corgi trainer has to go to like this fucking castle because the prince's corgi is misbehaving and they can't have that. So she has to like train the corgis while he's dealing with all this bullshit. And of course they fall in love because it's great. It's very good.
Yeah, write one, and I will watch it once it's made.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think just delve more into the ones I have like sampled. And yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I have no questions because
Okay, I'll keep going then.
Okay, you can keep going. Take over.
Yeah. Do you find it like a big difference? Like, okay, I'm not a writer. By the way, I should start this up. I'm not a writer. I just wanted to do this for
Well, you are
fun.
now, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I've written a couple screenplays for like short films for like film
Nice.
races and stuff. But which is what this competition reminded me of, because they give you what to write and you have like a time limit. I love pressure. Pressure
Yeah,
is good
I
for me.
definitely work better with pressure.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, do you find like a big difference between writing, like say like a short fiction story versus writing a screenplay? Besides like formatting, I guess.
Well, the formatting is a big thing for me because like when I decided to write, I'd basically written a really stupid like thriller, I guess, like a dark comedy like thriller. But like it kind of worked as like I've written 2 novels that definitely aren't novels, that were just screenplays done poorly, that I needed to then like transfer over. So like I knew it, and like people who'd read it were like, "This is a fine novel, but like it also would work very well as a screenplay." So I had to like kind of like learn how to do that. So for me, just like the screenplay world is really intimidating because there is that format and there's so many things I don't know and so many rules just from like having done no film shit, like no acting, nothing, just like only writing novels. So I did find that very.
You didn't do any acting because that surprises me a little bit.
No, I'm like one of the few people in a D&D podcast who has no background in theater, or I was on the debate team, so very cool over here.
That is theater.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so it's just I find it very intimidating and I always feel like I'm missing something, but it's fun. It's a very like snappy sort of writing, and like I've never actually written a screenplay from scratch. I guess I did once, but oh no, I never have, because I've always like brought over something I previously written, either like a short story or a novel, and like adapted it. So I would like, to me, the thought of like starting one and just like staring at a blank thing is so weird because I've always done it that way. But if I
Okay,
do the
so-
Hallmark one,
Yeah, I was gonna say for this Hallmark one, are you gonna like write like a Hallmark story
I
and
might.
then?
I feel like it's a really good way of like, because one thing I like to do when I'm editing sometimes is just a full rewrite, where it's like sometimes just changing a word or two or like whatever. It's hard to like see the forest for the trees,
Mhm.
where like you don't really make that much of a change because you don't want to just like butcher everything. Whereas if you just rewrite it, it takes a little longer technically, but it kind of helps me get out of my own head and actually enact changes. So writing it out is almost like doing a first draft. It's just in a different medium.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there
Or
anything
insane.
else you think you might like just because you've written so much of every genre? Is there any other style of writing you might try? Poetry or something? I don't know.
Probably not poetry. I feel like whenever I try to write poetry, it's so douchey.
You sound like a
Just so
12-year-old
douchey.
just
Yeah,
scribbling in
right?
their
Like,
journal.
because I think I'm trying to be deep and I just like, I don't know. Like maybe I also like I would need to read more poetry. I find poets really, really impressive because I just cannot do what they do.
Yeah.
So probably not poetry. I have so my partner's an artist, so we've done some like graphic novel stuff together. I would love to do like something like I'd love to get like a finished like graphic novel project out, but she's so busy with being hired by all these impressive people that like she hasn't got time for my project I can't pay her for. It's crazy. I don't know.
Good for
Um,
her.
yeah, she's killing it. But we're working on like D&D. And like I say D&D when I mean like tabletop role-playing games in general, like
Mhm.
specifically anything but D&D actually, but everyone knows it as D&D. So we're writing an adventure for a system called Morkborg, which is like this super grimdark like apocalyptic fantasy world, but like it's very fun. Like the tone and the theme is just so good because it is super grimdark, but like very tongue in cheek. So like I think if it wasn't so funny and like if it wasn't so like self aware, it would be unbearable. But it is so funny that like it's a very fun system.
That's
So
awesome.
we're gonna do that and hopefully release that this year. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, now I'm at a question.
It was a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here.
Yeah, if you want to let
Yeah.
the listeners know where they can find all of your works, I mean, we're also going to have links in the description, but for those audio
Sure.
learners.
I don't have like a me website yet, but I believe I gave you guys a link to a link tree. So the 2 stories that are currently out are on there, and the ones that come out will be added there when I get a chance. If you want to listen to the Sex and Dating Advice podcast, it's called Fuck Buddies. A lot of like podcast apps make you do like F***CK Buddies. We do have a live show in Toronto on February 20th. So if you're listening to this, I believe it'll be just in time. And if anyone wants to come, it's a Thursday because people kept complaining that the old shows were on a Tuesday. So come, it'll be fun. We're doing a pajama party for it. So everyone's going to be cozy as fuck. It's going to be lovely.
Dawn, are you free?
I'll have to check my calendar. I might be actually.
Hell yeah.
Found out some news. I actually might be.
Yeah.
If you like sci-fi D&D or like any kind of tabletop stuff, we do like a very narrative focused podcast called No Quest for the Wicked. And I will just plug this story that I read today is it's like award season right now. So if anybody has a Nebula like voting rights, it is on the Nebula forums under novelette. I guess technically it's not a short story. It's technically a novelette because it's over 7,500 words. It's also going to be in the Aurora Awards, which is like a Canadian awards under novelette as well. And it's actually anybody can vote in that. You do need a membership. The membership's like $10. But the cool thing is once it gets to like there's nominations and then there's like the finals. Once it gets to the finals, if you have a membership, you get everything that's in the finals, like in a voting packet to read. So you get like 5 novels, 5 short stories, 5 novelettes, 5 graphic novels. So it's pretty good bang for your buck. But vote for me.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to add those links to the description as well. So
Hell yeah.
people don't have to work so hard.
Thanks.
So thank you so much, Niall, for coming on Books and Booze.
Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome, and it's always a fucking joy.
Thank you. I know. Delulu.
Delulu. Jessica appreciates it.
Yeah, Jessica appreciates it.
Well, Niall meant it, so.
Well, thank you so much. We'll see you all, or here you can listen to us all next time for next week's Books and Booze episode. We'll see you all next time.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.